The Great Hall of the Galactic Council buzzed with angry voices. Translator devices worked hard to change the words of hundreds of different alien species into something everyone could understand. Ambassador Sarah Chen sat in her chair, watching the chaos with tired eyes. She had seen this same fight too many times before. "The Zephyrians stole our mining rights," shouted the leader of the Depth Collective. His blue skin turned darker with anger, and water dripped from his gills onto the floor. "They came to our system without permission and took our asteroids." The Zephyrian representative stood up. Her crystal body caught the light and threw rainbows across the room. When she spoke, her voice sounded like wind chimes. "We followed all laws. The mining rights were open to anyone. The Depth Collective was too slow to claim them." "Too slow?" The blue alien slammed his fist on his desk. "You knew we needed those minerals to build new cities under our oceans. You took them just to hurt us." Sarah rubbed her forehead. This was the 847th dispute she had helped solve in her 30 years as Earth's main ambassador. Border fights, trade wars, stolen technology, broken promises. She had seen them all. And every time the galaxy looked to humans to fix the problem. It had not always been this way. When humans first joined the Galactic Council 300 years ago, nobody expected much from them. Earth was a small world with only one intelligent species. Most planets had 3 or 4 different kinds of thinking beings. Humans seemed weak compared to the mighty Krathari warriors, or the ancient ethereal minds that could live for thousands of years. But humans had something special. They could listen to both sides of any fight and find a way to make everyone happy. When the gas-breathing nebula lords went to war with the rock-eating silicon borers, human negotiators found a solution. The nebula lords got the gas giant they wanted, and the silicon borers got the rocky moons around it. Everyone won. Word spread quickly. Humans were fair, humans were patient. Humans could solve any problem if you gave them time. Soon, every major dispute in the galaxy came to human mediators first. The Council even made it official. No war could start unless humans had tried to stop it first. Sarah looked around the Great Hall. There were beings made of living crystal, others that looked like walking trees, and some that were just clouds of gas held together by force fields. All of them were angry about something. All of them expected her to wave a magic wand and make their problems go away. "The Zephyrians must give back the mining rights," said the Depth Collective leader. "It is the only fair solution." "Impossible," replied the crystal being. "We have already started mining. We have spent millions of credits on equipment. We cannot just leave." Sarah stood up. The hall became quiet. Even after 3 centuries, her species still impressed other beings with their calm way of speaking. "I understand both sides," she said. Her voice carried clearly through the translator system. "The Depth Collective feels cheated because they needed those minerals for their people. The Zephyrians feel they followed the law and should not be punished for being faster." Both sides nodded. This was how human mediation always started, by showing that humans understood everyone's feelings. "Here is what I suggest," Sarah continued. "The Zephyrians can keep half the mining rights. They were first, so they deserve something. But they will share the profits with the Depth Collective for the first 10 years. The Depth Collective gets the minerals they need, and the Zephyrians get to keep their investment." The 2 leaders looked at each other. Neither side got everything they wanted, but both got something important. It was a classic human solution. "This seems acceptable," said the crystal being slowly. "We agree," said the blue alien, though he did not look happy about it. Sarah smiled. Another crisis solved, another war prevented, another day of peace in the galaxy. But as she sat back down, she felt something she tried not to think about too often. She was tired, bone deep, soul deep tired. For 300 years, her people had been the galaxy's babysitters. Every time someone threw a tantrum, humans had to clean up the mess. Every time someone wanted to fight, humans had to find a peaceful answer. She thought about her home world, Earth. It was a beautiful planet with green forests, blue oceans, and white clouds. But most humans never got to enjoy it anymore. They were too busy scattered across the galaxy, solving everyone else's problems. Human colonies grew food for worlds that could not feed themselves. Human doctors treated diseases on planets where the locals had given up trying to find cures. Human engineers built bridges, roads, and cities for species that were too busy fighting each other to build their own. And what did humanity get in return? The right to solve more problems. The honor of being the galaxy's permanent referees. The privilege of being everyone's favorite peacemakers. Sarah remembered her grandmother's stories about the early days. Back then, humans had dreams of exploring the stars, building great cities, and discovering amazing new things. Instead, they spent their time stopping other species from killing each other. Not that Sarah was complaining exactly. Peace was good. Helping others was right. But sometimes she wondered what would happen if humans just stopped. What if they said no to one mediation request? What if they let two species solve their own problems for once? She had asked that question to other ambassadors before. They always looked shocked. But Sarah, they would say, who else could do what we do? Who else has the patience? It was true. Humans were known throughout the galaxy for their patience. While other species would start shooting after a few insults, humans would sit through hours of angry words without getting upset. While others gave up on difficult problems, humans would keep trying new solutions until something worked. The Krithari had a saying, "Humans have the patience of stones and the wisdom of ancient trees." The ethereal minds called humanity the species that never stops believing in tomorrow. Even the war-loving plasma riders respected human negotiators, calling them the ones who turn swords into words. But patience had a price. Sarah's hair had turned gray from stress, and she was only 55 years old. Her father had died while she was mediating a trade dispute 3 systems away. Her daughter grew up without her mother because Sarah was too busy keeping the galaxy peaceful. The hall was filling up again. News traveled fast in space, and already she could see new problems arriving. The insect-like hive clusters were arguing with the plant people called the growing ones. The machine intelligences from the core worlds had sent an urgent message about territory disputes. Sarah sighed and checked her schedule. Tomorrow she had meetings with 5 different species about 4 different wars that might start if she could not find solutions. Next week she was supposed to visit the Outer Rim colonies where some new crisis was developing. She touched the communication device on her wrist. A message was waiting from Admiral Marcus Webb, commander of Earth's defense fleet. "Sarah," his voice said quietly, "we might have a big problem developing in the Kepler system. Some group called the Hegemony is making threats against our farming colonies. I know you are busy, but we might need to talk soon." Sarah closed her eyes. Another problem, another crisis, another test of human patience. She had no idea that this new problem would be different. She had no idea that human patience, tested for 3 centuries, was about to reach its breaking point. She had no idea that the galaxy was about to learn what happened when the most peaceful species in known space finally got angry. All she knew was that she was tired, and there was always another crisis waiting. The hegemony of pure thought considered themselves the most advanced beings in the galaxy. They had no physical bodies, existing instead as living energy contained within special force fields. To them, all other life forms were primitive creatures made of crude matter. Their leader, a being that called itself the Prime Consciousness, floated in the center of their great ship. Its energy form pulsed with colors that had no names in any material language. Around it, dozens of other energy beings waited for orders. "The inefficiency is disgusting," the Prime Consciousness declared. Its voice was like electricity singing through wires. "Look at this system. Kepler 438, a perfectly good star with 8 planets, and the matter forms have only managed to use 1 of them properly." The other beings pulsed in agreement. To the hegemony, matter was just energy that had not been properly organized. Planets, asteroids, even living creatures were nothing more than raw materials waiting to be converted into pure energy. "The farming world produces food for dozens of systems," said another consciousness. "But imagine how much energy we could harvest if we converted the entire planet. The inefficiency makes my form ache." The Prime Consciousness studied the data flowing through their ship's sensors. Kepler 438b was home to 847 million humans. They had spent 2 centuries turning the rocky world into the most productive farming planet in the galaxy. Golden wheat fields stretched from one horizon to another. Vast orchards grew fruits that fed hungry populations across 3 sectors of space. Send the standard notice, the Prime Consciousness ordered. 72 hours for all matter-based entities to evacuate. Then we begin planetary conversion. This was how the hegemony always operated. They would arrive at a world, declare it inefficient, and give the inhabitants 3 days to leave. Most species packed up and ran. Those few who tried to fight discovered that energy weapons were useless against beings made of pure energy. The hegemony had been expanding this way for 50 years. They had consumed 17 worlds so far, converting each one into raw energy that they stored in massive collection stations. Each time, human negotiators had appeared to work out some kind of deal. The first treaty had established zones of expansion where the hegemony could operate. The second treaty had created evaluation periods before conversion could begin. The third treaty had required impact studies and relocation assistance. Each new treaty had more rules, more delays, more complications. But the hegemony had learned to work around human patience. Their lawyers, energy beings specialized in finding loopholes, had become experts at following the exact words of treaties while ignoring their spirit. If a treaty said they could not convert inhabited worlds, they would wait until most inhabitants had evacuated, then claim the world was no longer truly inhabited. If a treaty required 30 days' notice, they would give exactly 30 days and 1 minute. The humans always complained. The humans always negotiated. The humans always found some new compromise that let the hegemony keep expanding while looking like they were following the rules the Prime Consciousness had no reason to think this time would be different. The evacuation notice reached Kepler 438b 3 hours later. Governor Maria Santos read it while standing in her office overlooking the planetary capital of New Harvest. Outside her window, she could see the endless wheat fields that fed so much of the galaxy. Her assistant, a young man named David, looked pale as he finished reading the message. Governor, the evacuation ships are already being sent. Earth Command expects us to begin loading civilians within 6 hours. Maria was quiet for a long time. She was 60 years old and had spent 30 of those years building this world. Her parents had been among the first colonists. Her children had been born here. Her husband was buried in the soil that had grown more food than any other planet in human space. "Ma'am?" David asked nervously. "The evacuation ships—" "Cancel them," Maria said quietly. "What?" "Cancel the evacuation. Send them back." Maria walked to her communication console and opened a channel to the Human Defense Fleet. "I want to speak to Admiral Webb right now." David stared at her. "Governor, you cannot be serious. The hegemony has never failed to convert a world. Their energy weapons can destroy entire fleets. We have to evacuate." Maria's fingers moved over the controls. Admiral Webb's face appeared on the screen within minutes. He was a tall man with gray hair and tired eyes. Behind him, she could see the bridge of his flagship, the Terra Firma. "Governor Santos," he said, "I assume you are calling about the evacuation schedule. We can have the first ships there in—" "Admiral," Maria interrupted, "we are not evacuating." The bridge behind Admiral Webb became very quiet. Maria could see other officers stopping their work to listen. "Governor, I understand your feelings, but the hegemony has superior technology. Their energy-based forms cannot be harmed by conventional weapons. Every species that has tried to fight them has lost." "Admiral," Maria said, and her voice carried the weight of 30 years of building, growing, and caring for this world. "I am not asking you to fight them. I am telling you that we are not running away anymore." She could see something change in the Admiral's eyes. Behind him, she noticed officers exchanging glances. "Governor," Admiral Webb said carefully, "are you absolutely certain about this decision?" "Yes." "And you speak for the entire colony?" Maria looked out her window again. In the distance, she could see farmers working in their fields. Children were playing in the streets of New Harvest. This was home. This was what humans had built with centuries of work and patience and hope. "I speak for everyone who is tired of running," she said. "I speak for everyone who is tired of giving up what we build to bullies who think might makes right. I speak for everyone who believes that sometimes you have to make a stand." Admiral Webb was quiet for nearly a minute. When he spoke again, his voice was different, harder. "Governor, if you are making this decision, then you need to understand what it means. Are you prepared to accept all consequences? Yes. Then I want you to repeat your decision on an open channel. All frequencies. I want every species in the galaxy to hear what you are saying. Maria felt her heart beating faster, but her voice stayed steady. Open the channel. A few seconds later, Admiral Webb nodded. You are broadcasting to all of known space, Governor. Maria took a deep breath. This is Governor Maria Santos of Kepler 438b. The hegemony of pure thought has ordered us to evacuate our world so they can convert it to energy. For 3 centuries, humanity has responded to such demands by negotiating, compromising, and finding peaceful solutions. She paused, thinking of her parents, her children, her husband's grave. Today that ends. We are not leaving our home. We are not abandoning what we have built. We are not running away anymore. If the hegemony wants this world, they will have to take it from us. The transmission ended. Across the galaxy, on thousands of worlds and millions of ships, beings stopped what they were doing to stare at their communication devices. The humans had said no. For the first time in 3 centuries, the galaxy's most patient species had refused to compromise. On the bridge of the terra firma, Admiral Webb looked at his officers. They had been waiting for this moment longer than any of them cared to admit. Sir? Asked his communications officer. What are your orders? Admiral Webb touched a control that had not been activated in over 200 years. Throughout human space, ships that had been disguised as research vessels and cargo haulers began receiving new instructions. Crews that had spent decades pretending to be scientists and merchants started revealing their true purpose. Send a message to all human forces, Admiral Webb said. Operation Long Patience is over. It is time for Operation Short Temper to begin. The emergency session of the Galactic Council began exactly 6 hours after Governor Santos made her announcement. Representatives from 847 species filled the Great Hall on Nexus Prime, all expecting the usual routine. The hegemony crisis would be handled the same way as all the others. Human negotiators would call for emergency talks. The energy beings would agree to discuss the situation. Some new treaty would be written with more rules and restrictions. The humans would find a way to make everyone save face while solving the problem. But as the session began, beings throughout the hall started noticing something strange. The human section was nearly empty. Ambassador Sarah Chen walked slowly to the speaker's platform. Behind her sat only 3 other human diplomats instead of the usual 50. The rest of the seats that had been occupied by humans for 3 centuries, were vacant. Honored representatives, Sarah began, but her voice was different than usual. Gone was the warm, patient tone that had mediated thousands of disputes. In its place was something cold and final. I have come to make an announcement. The hall buzzed with nervous whispers. Beings who had never seen humans act strangely were starting to feel uncomfortable. The hegemony's representative, a shimmering field of contained plasma called Speaker for the Pure, pulsed with dismissive amusement. Let us skip the usual dramatic speeches, human. Kepler 438b will be converted as scheduled. The matter forms have 72 hours to evacuate. This is not negotiable. Sarah looked directly at the energy being. You are absolutely right. The hall fell silent. That was not the response anyone had expected. It is not negotiable, Sarah continued. For 300 years, my species has been the galaxy's mediators, peacekeepers, and problem solvers. We have sat through countless hours of arguments, found compromises for impossible situations, and crafted solutions that let everyone claim victory. She paused, looking around the great hall at faces, crystal forms, gas clouds, and mechanical constructs that had grown accustomed to human patience. We did this because we believed in the possibility of peace. We thought that if we showed enough patience, enough understanding, enough willingness to find middle ground, that eventually all species would learn to resolve their differences without violence. The Speaker for the Pure pulsed brighter. Your species has served its purpose well, but this changes nothing. The conversion will proceed. Yes, Sarah said quietly. It will. Confused murmurs filled the hall. The human ambassador was agreeing with the hegemony. This was unprecedented. But not the way you expect, Sarah continued. You see, we have realized something important. Our patience has been taken for granted. Our willingness to compromise has been seen as weakness. Our desire for peace has been exploited by those who prefer conquest. She activated her personal communicator. and her words were broadcast throughout the hall and across the galaxy. As of this moment, humanity withdraws from all mediation activities. We will no longer negotiate disputes between other species. We will no longer provide emergency aid to worlds in crisis. We will no longer compromise with beings who mistake our patience for weakness. The hall erupted in shocked voices. Representatives leaped to their feet demanding explanations. This had never happened before. Humans did not just stop helping. Humans did not abandon their responsibilities. Humans did not give ultimatums. But Sarah was not finished. All human agricultural shipments to non-human worlds are suspended immediately. All human medical missions are recalled. All human engineering projects on alien worlds are abandoned. All human trade agreements are void. The speaker for the Pure flickered with what might have been concern. You cannot be serious. Your species lives to serve others. It is your nature. Our nature, Sarah replied, is to be patient until our patience runs out, to be peaceful until peace becomes impossible, to be reasonable until reason fails. She looked around the hall one more time. 3 centuries ago, we chose to be the galaxy's peacemakers because we hoped it would make the universe a better place. Today, we choose to stop being peacemakers because we have learned that some beings only understand strength. The massive communication screens around the hall began displaying images from across the galaxy. Human freighter ships that had been delivering food to hungry worlds were turning around and heading back to human space. Medical ships that had been treating plague victims on the outer rim were receiving recall orders. Engineering teams that had been building orbital stations and terraforming equipment were packing up their tools and leaving. The vast network of human assistants that had quietly become essential to galactic civilization was shutting down. But that was not the most shocking thing appearing on the screens. Ships were moving in the deep spaces between stars. Ships that nobody had seen before. Ships that had been hidden, disguised, or simply ignored for centuries. They were not merchant vessels or research ships or diplomatic transports. They were warships, and there were thousands of them. The ethereal mind representative of being so ancient it remembered the first galactic wars spoke in a voice like wind through crystal caves. Humans. Where did these ships come from? Sarah smiled, but it was not the warm, diplomatic smile the galaxy was used to. It was the smile of someone who had been holding back for far too long. Did you really think that the most successful species in galactic history got that way by being helpless? Did you imagine that we survived and thrived by having no way to defend ourselves? Did you believe that we chose patience because we had no choice? She gestured to the screens showing the moving fleets. For 3 centuries, we have maintained the largest military force in the galaxy. We have developed weapons that could end civilizations and defenses that could stop any attack. We have kept these capabilities hidden because we hoped we would never need to use them. The hall had become so quiet that the sound of air recyclers seemed loud. We disguised our warships as cargo vessels, our weapon platforms as research stations, our military bases as colonies. We trained soldiers and called them farmers, engineers, and diplomats. We built an empire and called it a peaceful trading network. The speaker for the Pure was flickering rapidly now. You were deceiving us? We were hoping, Sarah corrected. We were hoping that patience would be enough. We were hoping that reason would prevail. We were hoping that we would never need to show the galaxy what humans are capable of when our patience finally ends. She walked closer to the hegemony representative. Have 72 hours to withdraw from the Kepler system and from all human space. You will return every world you have converted that belonged to species under human protection. You will compensate the families of every being killed in your expansions. Impossible. The energy being pulsed. We are pure thought. We are beyond the reach of matter-based weapons. We cannot be harmed by crude physical attacks. Sarah's smile became colder. You are quite right. Conventional weapons cannot hurt energy beings like yourselves. She paused. Fortunately, we stopped using conventional weapons 200 years ago. The screens around the hall changed again. Now they showed technical specifications, weapon designs, and battle plans that made even the war-loving Krathery step backward in shock. Gravity manipulation devices that could collapse the force fields containing energy beings. Quantum disruption weapons that could turn organized energy into random chaos. And most terrifying of all, forced matter conversion technology that could turn energy beings back into crude physical matter, the ultimate humiliation for creatures that considered themselves transcendent. These weapons exist for one purpose, Sarah announced to the hall and the galaxy. to be used against anyone foolish enough to test the limits of human patience. The speaker for the pure was barely visible now, its energy form fluctuating wildly. This is impossible. You are bluffing. Humans are peaceful. Humans are reasonable. Humans do not make threats. Sarah walked back to the center of the platform. Humans are patient, she said clearly. But patience is a choice, not a weakness. And our choice ends the moment you attack Kepler 438b. She looked around the hall one final time. The age of human mediation is over. The age of human consequences has begun. Choose wisely. As she walked out of the hall, the screens continued showing images of human fleets moving through space like silent predators. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as they realized that the most peaceful species in known space was also the most dangerous when pushed too far. The hegemony had wanted to test human limits. They were about to discover exactly what those limits were. The hegemony conversion fleet arrived at Kepler 438b expecting to find empty cities and fleeing refugees. Instead, they found something that had not been seen in galactic space for over 300 years. Humans preparing for war. The terra firma held position directly above the planet. But she was not alone. Ships emerged from behind the planet's moons, sleek, predatory vessels with names that sent chills through anyone who bothered to translate them. Retribution, terrible swift sword, final warning, and no more patience. These were not the peaceful research vessels or merchant ships the galaxy knew. These were instruments of destruction that had been hidden in plain sight for centuries, disguised as everything from mining platforms to agricultural transports. Admiral Webb stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the hegemony fleet approach. Behind him, officers worked quietly at stations that looked nothing like the equipment found on normal human ships. Weapons that existed nowhere else in the galaxy, powered up with a deep humming sound. The prime consciousness itself had come to oversee the conversion, confident that no matter-based life form could challenge the supremacy of pure thought. It transmitted directly to the human fleet. Matter forms, you will withdraw immediately. We have come to claim this world for efficient energy conversion. Resistance is pointless. Admiral Webb activated his communication system. His response was broadcast on all frequencies, so that every species in the galaxy could hear. This is Admiral Marcus Webb of the Human Defense Force. You have entered human space without permission and threatened human citizens. You have exactly one chance to leave peacefully. The energy being's response crackled with arrogant amusement. Pathetic creatures of crude matter. You cannot harm beings of pure energy. Your primitive weapons are useless against us. We are beyond your ability to touch. Admiral Webb looked at his weapons officer, Commander Sarah Park. She was the daughter of a diplomat and the granddaughter of a farmer, but she had spent 20 years learning how to kill things that thought they could not be killed. Commander Park. Admiral Webb said quietly, "Please show our guests what human ingenuity can accomplish." "Yes, sir," she replied, her fingers moving over controls that had been designed specifically for this moment, firing quantum disruption torpedoes. The weapons that left the human ships did not look impressive. They were small, dark objects that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The hegemony fleet barely bothered to acknowledge them, until they exploded. The quantum disruption field expanded in perfect spheres, and wherever they touched the hegemony's energy form, something impossible happened. The carefully organized patterns of living energy began to unravel. The force fields that contained their consciousness started to collapse. The beings of pure thought found themselves scattered into random electrical noise. "Impossible," screamed the prime consciousness as its own form began to flicker. "We are beyond physical laws. We cannot be harmed by matter-based weapons." Admiral Webb's voice was calm and cold. "You are correct. You cannot be harmed by matter-based weapons. These are not matter-based weapons." More human ships appeared from seemingly empty space. Cloaking devices shut down to reveal an entire battle fleet that had been waiting in the shadows between planets. Each ship fired different types of weapons. Some that created artificial gravity wells strong enough to crush force fields, others that generated coherent electromagnetic pulses that turned organized energy into chaos. But the most terrifying weapons were the conversion bombs. When they detonated around hegemony ships, they did something that violated every principle the energy beings believed in. They forced pure energy back into crude matter. Beings who had transcended physical existence found themselves suddenly trapped in solid, heavy, limited flesh. The screams that came from the converted beings were unlike anything ever heard in space. They were the cries of gods forced to become mortal, of infinite consciousness compressed into finite brains, of perfect thought made imperfect by the limitations of physical reality. The main hegemony fleet lasted exactly 11 minutes and 37 seconds. But Admiral Webb was not finished. As the surviving energy beings tried to retreat, he opened a communication channel that reached every corner of the galaxy. This is a message to the hegemony of pure thought and anyone who is allied with them. For 50 years you have expanded across the galaxy, converting worlds and destroying civilizations. You have broken 17 different treaties, ignored 42 ceasefire agreements, and caused the deaths of over 2 billion beings. His voice carried the weight of centuries of restrained anger. Today, that bill comes due. The screens throughout the galaxy lit up with images of human fleets emerging from deep space. Ships that had been disguised as trading vessels revealed massive weapon arrays. Research stations threw off their false exteriors to show orbital bombardment platforms. Even civilian colonies opened hidden hangars to release fighter squadrons. The hegemony had consumed 17 star systems over the past 50 years. Now 17 separate human fleets moved toward those systems with surgical precision. On the bridge of the terra firma, Commander Park monitored the coordinated assault. "Admiral, all fleets report ready. We have the hegemony homeworlds completely surrounded." "Good," Admiral Webb replied. "Begin Phase 2. What followed was not a war in any traditional sense. Wars implied that both sides had a chance to fight. This was an extermination. The hegemony's great energy collection stations, massive structures that stored the converted essence of destroyed worlds, were systematically dismantled. Their defense fleets, confident in their superiority over matter-based life, discovered that humans had spent centuries developing weapons specifically designed to kill energy beings. Forced matter conversion bombs turned their greatest warriors into helpless flesh creatures. Quantum disruption fields unraveled their most sophisticated defenses. Gravity manipulation devices crushed their supposedly invulnerable ships by collapsing the space around them. But the humans did not stop at military targets. Every world the hegemony had consumed, every civilization they had destroyed, every treaty they had broken, it all mattered now. Human forces moved through hegemony space like a tide of vengeance, undoing 50 years of conquest in a matter of hours. The energy beings who had thought themselves gods found out what it felt like to be prey. The prime consciousness itself, trapped in a hastily constructed force field as its fleet died around it, transmitted a final desperate message. "We surrender. We surrender. Call off your ships. We will withdraw. We will return the converted worlds." Admiral Webb's response was broadcast to every species in the galaxy. "Surrender is not an option. You had 3 centuries to learn the value of peace. You chose conquest instead. You had 72 hours to leave our space. You chose war instead. You have had 50 years to show mercy to your victims. You chose cruelty instead." The Admiral paused, letting his words sink in. "Today you learn what humans choose when our patience ends." The assault on the hegemony core worlds took exactly 72 hours, the same amount of time they had given to the inhabitants of Kepler 438b when it was over. The most powerful energy beings in the galaxy existed only as archived data in human computer systems. The conversion was poetic justice. Beings who had turned countless worlds into energy found themselves converted into information, aware but powerless, eternal but trapped. As the human fleets regrouped and began the journey home, Admiral Webb made one final transmission to the galaxy. "Let this be a lesson to any species considering the conquest of human worlds or our allies. We chose patience for 3 centuries because we hoped for peace. We offered mediation and compromise because we believed in the possibility of a better galaxy. We provided aid and assistance because we thought compassion might inspire compassion in return." He looked directly into the camera, and his eyes held the weight of every human who had ever died for galactic peace. "But never mistake our patience for weakness. Never confuse our desire for peace with inability to wage war. Never assume that our choice to help others means we cannot defend ourselves." The transmission ended, and the galaxy was left to process what it had just witnessed. The most peaceful species in known space had revealed itself to be the most dangerous when provoked. The gentle mediators were also the ultimate predators. The patient farmers and diplomats were also the most sophisticated warriors the galaxy had ever seen, and Every species that had ever taken human kindness for granted suddenly realized they had been living next to a sleeping dragon for 300 years. The dragon was awake now. The Galactic Council reconvened exactly 1 month after the hegemony ceased to exist. The Great Hall looked the same as always, but everything had changed. Representatives who had once argued loudly now spoke in careful, measured tones. Species that had feuded for centuries suddenly found ways to agree on things that had seemed impossible before. Ambassador Sarah Chen walked to the speaker's platform, but the being who stood there was different from the patient mediator who had left a month ago. She carried herself with quiet confidence, and when she spoke, every representative listened with the kind of attention usually reserved for gods or natural disasters. "Honored colleagues," she began, "I want to discuss the future of galactic relations." The hall was silent except for the soft sounds of translation devices working. No one interrupted. No one demanded to speak first. No one shouted over her words. For the past month, something interesting has happened. Border disputes that had dragged on for decades were suddenly resolved. Trade wars that seemed impossible to end were settled with fair agreements. Species that claimed they could never coexist found ways to compromise. She looked around the hall, noting the way beings who had once glared at each other now avoided eye contact. This happened without human mediation, without human patience, without human compromise. You solved your own problems because you chose to solve them. The Krathari war leader, a massive creature with 4 arms and scars from 100 battles, spoke carefully. "Ambassador Chen, that is, my people, have great respect for human capabilities. We would not wish to trouble you with minor disputes." The crystalline Zephyrian representative chimed in agreement. "The recent demonstration of human military excellence has reminded us all of the value of peaceful resolution." Sarah nodded. "I am glad you have learned to appreciate peace, but I want to make something clear to everyone here. Humanity did not reveal our military capabilities to terrorize you into submission. We revealed them because we had no choice." She activated the central display, showing images of human colonies, cities, and families. "For 3 centuries, we chose patience because we believed in something better. We mediated your conflicts because we hoped you would learn to mediate your own. We provided aid and assistance because we thought compassion would inspire compassion." The images changed to show the destroyed hegemony fleets and converted worlds. The hegemony forced us to choose between our principles and our survival. They pushed us past the point where patience was possible. They made peace impossible through their actions. Sarah walked to the center of the platform. "But now that you have seen what we can do when pushed too far, I want you to understand what we choose to do next." A new image appeared on the displays. Human medical ships landing on plague-stricken worlds. Human engineers rebuilding damaged stations. Human farmers delivering food to hungry colonies. We choose to return to the work of peace. Our hospitals will resume treating the sick. Our engineers will continue building infrastructure. Our farmers will keep feeding the hungry. Our diplomats will mediate disputes for anyone who asks. Confused murmurs filled the hall. After demonstrating overwhelming military power, humans were going back to being helpers? "I see your confusion," Sarah continued. "You expected us to become conquerors. You thought we would use our revealed strength to dominate the galaxy. You assumed that showing our weapons meant we intended to rule through fear." She smiled, and for the first time in a month it was the warm, genuine smile the galaxy remembered. "But that is exactly the opposite of why we built those weapons. We created the most powerful military force in the galaxy for one reason, so we would never have to use it. We developed weapons that could destroy civilizations so that civilizations would not need to be destroyed." The ancient ethereal mind spoke in its wind-through crystal voice. "You built ultimate power in order to not use it?" "We built ultimate power in order to make it unnecessary," Sarah corrected. "For 300 years our patience worked because you did not know what would happen if that patience ended. Now you know." She gestured to the empty space where the hegemony delegation had once sat. "The hegemony tested our limits and discovered them. They pushed us until patience became impossible and peace became war. They learned what humans do when our forbearance finally snaps." Sarah looked directly at each delegation in turn. "I hope that lesson will never need to be taught again." The speaker for the Silicon Collective, a mechanical being with a voice like grinding gears, asked, "What are your terms for continued peace, Ambassador Chen?" The same terms we have always offered, Sarah replied. Treat others with respect. Resolve disputes through negotiation. Honor your agreements. Help those who need help. Choose cooperation over conquest. And if we fail to meet those terms? Sarah's expression did not change, but somehow the temperature in the hall seemed to drop a few degrees. Then you will discover whether your case is different from the hegemonies. Over the following months, something unprecedented happened throughout the galaxy. Wars ended not through human mediation, but through voluntary agreement. Trade disputes were resolved not by human compromise, but by mutual negotiation. Species that had been enemies for centuries suddenly discovered they could be neighbors. The change was not driven by fear alone, though fear was certainly part of it. It was driven by understanding. For the first time, every species in the galaxy understood what they were dealing with when they interacted with humans. They were not dealing with weaklings who could be bullied. They were not dealing with naive idealists who could be easily fooled. They were dealing with a species so powerful they could afford to be patient, so dangerous they could choose to be peaceful, so capable of destruction they could dedicate themselves to creation. The human agricultural ships resumed their food deliveries, but now the recipient worlds never forgot that those same ships could carry planet-killing weapons. The human medical teams returned to their healing missions, but their patients never forgot that human knowledge of how to preserve life came with human knowledge of how to end it. The human engineers went back to building bridges and cities, but everyone who used those structures knew that the beings who could build so well could also destroy so completely. Ambassador Chen found herself busier than ever, but in a different way. Instead of spending her days mediating between angry species, she spent them helping reasonable beings find solutions to shared problems. Instead of listening to threats and ultimatums, she heard genuine questions and sincere offers of cooperation. The galaxy had not become perfect. There were still disagreements, still competing interests, still occasional tensions between different species, but now those disagreements were handled with an awareness that they existed in a universe where the most patient species was also the most dangerous. When that patience was exhausted, the Krathari developed a new saying, "Anger the human last." The ethereal minds called it the wisdom of the final option. Even the war-loving plasma writers learned to speak softly around human diplomats, calling them the speakers for the sleeping thunder. 6 months after the hegemony's destruction, Sarah received a message from Governor Santos on Kepler 438b. The farming world was thriving more than ever, its golden wheat fields stretching toward horizons that would never again be threatened by energy beings who thought matter was inefficient. "Ambassador," the governor's message said, "I wanted to thank you for what happened after our decision to stay. I know it was not easy for humanity to reveal what we really are, but I think the galaxy needed to learn that patience is not weakness, that peace is not helplessness, and that the choice to be gentle comes from strength, not from the lack of alternatives." Sarah smiled as she composed her reply. Outside her office window on Nexus Prime, she could see representatives from dozens of species walking together, talking quietly, working together on solutions instead of arguing about problems. "Governor," she wrote back, "I think you are right. The galaxy needed to learn that lesson. I just hope they never make us teach it again." But even as she sent the message, Sarah knew that the lesson would not be forgotten. No species would ever again mistake human patience for weakness. No being would ever again think that human cooperation came from inability to choose otherwise. The galaxy had learned what happened when humanity's forbearance finally snapped. And in learning that lesson, they had discovered something more valuable than all the weapons and threats in the universe. They had learned to choose peace not because they were forced to, but because they wanted to. The age of human mediation had ended, but the age of voluntary cooperation had begun. And perhaps, Sarah thought, that was what 3 centuries of patience had been building toward all along.